Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the Committee of Adjustment, hearings for Urban Panel 1. Nous sommes un tribunal quasi-judiciaire de la ville d'Ottawa et tenons des audiences sur des demandes en vertu de la loi sur l'aménagement du territoire, y compris les dérogations mineures aux zonages et les autorisations de séparer un terrain. Nos audiences se font maintenant en personne à la place Ben Franklin, au 101 de la promenade Center Point. Nous offrons aussi la participation à distance par vidéoconférence pour nos intervenants qui se sont inscrits. We're live streaming on YouTube, and the video will be archived and available for future viewing by the public. My name is Simon Coakley. I'll be chairing today's hearing because our regular chair, Ellen Tremblay, is not with us in person and has asked me to chair in her place. You can address me by my name or as chair. With me are my fellow panel members here in the room, John Blatherwick on my right and Arto Keklikian on my left, and Sharon Lequier is joining us on video. The procedure for the hearings will be as follows. Listed on the agenda and appearing on screen from time to time are the applications we'll hear today. For the sake of efficiency, I may deal with an agenda item in a slightly different order. Panel members have reviewed the planning reports and any written submissions in support of or in opposition to each of the applications. Today, we'll hear any oral submissions relating to these applications. As part of the statutory public notification requirements, each applicant was required to post a sign on the property in question before the hearing. They also had to confirm in writing that they did do so, or they'll need to swear or affirm an oath today that they've fulfilled the sign posting requirements. I have been advised that we have received written confirmation that all applications being heard today did adhere to the sign posting requirements, so we will not be administering any oaths. The panel may ask for a brief presentation of an application, followed by questions for the applicant and city planning staff. We will then hear from members of the public who have registered to speak, and we may also have questions for them. Finally, the applicant, who has the burden of proof, will have an opportunity to make final comments in reply. I would ask you that you address your comments to me as the chair, starting with your name and spelling it if necessary, and your municipal address for the record, and if you are representing someone, the name of the person that or organization you're representing. All presentations are limited to 5 minutes, and any exceptions are at my discretion. At the end of the hearing, the panel may either make an oral decision, or we may reserve our decision, which means it won't be delivered today. In either case, and within 10 days, the Committee of Adjustment will send the official written decision and reasons for it to all the parties, participants, and anyone else who has requested a copy. Does anyone have any questions about the procedure we're going to be following today? All right, then. We do have several applications before us. Before we do that, there are a couple of preliminary matters I'd like to address. Do any of the panel members have any declarations of interest that they would like registered? Hearing and seeing none. I'll now ask if we could confirm the minutes of the previous hearings. Can we confirm the minutes of the July 5th meeting? Yes. And can we confirm the minutes of the July 19th meeting? Okay, assent. Thank you very much. We now have a number of adjournment requests that we will deal with. The first is item number 3, which is 577 Melbourne Avenue. Now, my understanding it's the planning department that has requested the adjournment for the completion of a tree report. Sir, if you'd like to identify yourself, and then I can ask, and if you could push the button on your microphone. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair. My name is Jacob Bolduc. I'm a planner with Foten Consultants. We're not registered as the agent on this file, but we are the planners. The architect who is the agent is not here today. We have received a request for an adjournment due to an incomplete tree information report. We've made our arborists aware of this, and they're currently working on the revisions for the information necessary to deem it complete. We would be happy to accept the adjournment, but we would request a specific date if possible, rather than adjourn sine die.
Okay. Before we deal with it, does anybody, whether panel members or members of the audience, want to comment on the adjournment, or does the city have any comments on the adjournment? Okay. Seeing none. 6th of September, 20th of September?
We were thinking the 20th of September.
20th of September?
Give us a little more time.
Okay. Could I have a motion from a member to adjourn? Mr. Blatherwick, all in, signing to the 20th of September, that works for city planning, our staff, committee of adjustment staff. Okay, all in favor? Myself included, thank you very much.
Thank you.
So this matter stands adjourned to the 20th of September. The next adjournment, item number 5, 96 Joliet Avenue. Is there anybody in the room to speak to this one? No. Is there anybody online to speak to this item? Mr. Van Wyck. Okay. I understand that this is a joint city and applicant request. Is that correct?
Yes, Mr. Chair, that is correct.
Sorry, if you could repeat that, Mr. Van Wyck.
Oh, sorry. Yes, Mr. Chair, that is correct.
Okay. And my understanding is to enable you to confirm the accuracy of the applications that you're actually making.
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Again, before we establish a when, does anybody on the panel or anybody here in the room or anybody online wish to comment on the request for an adjournment? No? Okay. It's our belief that we probably should be adjourning this.
Mr. Chair,
Sorry,
the agent is online.
Oh.
Perhaps she would like to.
I apologize.
the
Is that Ms. Clark?
Yes, through you, Chair. Thank you.
Sorry.
We have no issues with the adjournment request. We're on board.
Thank you very much. Sorry for that. It's our view that we probably are best adjourning this sine die because if if there are changes in the application, it will have to be recirculated in any event. And so it probably is best to proceed that way.
Okay.
Is that okay? Could I have then anyway, yes, Ms. Tremblay.
Sorry, I didn't raise my hand.
Okay, so the hand went up by mistake, the little hand logo on the icon on the screen.
It must have a mind of its own today, so I'll just watch for it. I didn't even notice that happened.
Okay, could I then have a proper motion from a member to, again, Mr. Blatherwick, second by Mr. Kekakan. So this is also adjourned sine die. Thank you very much. Now I believe item number 7, which is 9 Morris Street. There is also a request for an adjournment on this item. Now this is, I believe, the city is requesting the adjournment. Can I just confirm that? The plan, I believe, is Ms. Alcative. Is that correct? That it's
no, it's actually, we were asking for the adjournment.
My apologies.
My name is Chris Yelkotsi, acting for the applicant.
okay. My apologies.
My name is Lorena Moya. I am the resident of 7 Morris Street.
Okay.
We have met.
So would you, Mr. Jelkowski?
It's okay. Yelkotsi is fine.
Okay, Jelkowski. Could you explain why you are requesting the adjournment?
So I've made a mistake in terms of the paperwork that was filed on this application. We had a change that was made to the plans that I had actually proposed as part of the development, and then I actually submitted the incorrect site plan for the application. Our hope is that the change is fairly small in the sense that it's a side yard requirement going from 1.2 meters to 1 meter. And a combined side yard requirement from roughly 1.3 meters to 1.5 meters down to 1.3 meters. We did, and I provided a flyer, and we did circulate with the community association the correct plans. So they were quite publicly aware of the application, except for the fact that, of course, the application as filed was incorrect. So I have submitted the corrected plans, and I guess it's up to the committee to decide on whether you would require a recirculation or if we can just move and to the next hearing with the revised plans.
Okay. Ma'am, did you want to address the issue of an adjournment?
Well, I didn't know of this issue, so we definitely would be interested in seeing the correct plans because we've worked, I've had like contractors and my lawyer to look at the plans, and so we were working on with the wrong plans.
Okay. Now, my understanding is from Committee of Adjustment staff that the feeling is that the plans may very well have to be recirculated. Is that correct?
Through you, Mr. Chair, if there is an amendment to the variances being requested, they would require recirculation.
So I believe on that basis, again, we probably would have to adjourn sine die. Does I'd understand you like to proceed as soon as possible, but if there is a requirement for recirculation, that would give you the time to do so in any, because it would have to happen in any event.
Yes, Mr. Chair, we're quite aware that on a recirculation, it's generally done sine die or to a hearing that would be within a time frame. We will have all the documentation and the required circulation fee in tomorrow morning with the committee.
Okay, I think we still probably would adjourn sine die, and again, unless any of the panel members have a question or a comment they want to address. No, in which case, could I get a motion to adjourn? Mr. Blatherwick again, Mr. Keklikian, I'll accept as a second. So again, a matter agreed. Thank you. So this matter is also adjourned sine die. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, so we've done all of that. We do have one item that we believe we might be able to dispose of reasonably quickly, I believe, and that's item number 1, 47 Grosvenor Avenue. I'm sorry. My mistake.
This is an unusual
No.
procedure item. I actually
Item
have,
number 4. Sorry, it's item number 4 is 47 Grosvenor Avenue. Not
I actually have a request for further adjournment, which wasn't on your list.
Oh, all right. Which item?
To make your lives easier. Item 9 on 31 Gordon. We had submitted revised drawings earlier this morning that we believe addressed the concerns of the immediate neighbor. In which case we would have been more than pleased to go ahead today because there were no concerns from staff or from the immediate neighbor. Half an hour ago, we got information from the designer that there was a further refinement requested by the immediate neighbor to the drawings. We haven't been able to provide those to the committee or to staff. So to allow time for us to get those drawings on your file and on the hands of the staff, we would ask for the item to be adjourned to the hearing on September the 6th.
Sorry, could I just get, for the record, could I just get your name?
Sorry, Murray Chown, CHOWN, Director of Planning and Development, Novatech Engineering.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, do any of the panel members have any questions, concerns? Sorry? No? Anybody here in the room or online? Okay, there was, and I would like to confirm with the planner, Ms. Linker, there had been a request for an adjournment due to a tree report, but I just want to confirm that that has been addressed adequately. Ms. Van Wyk, are you replacing Ms. Linker?
Yes, Mr. Chair, Ms. Linker is away this week, so I'm stepping in. There was a previous request for an adjournment, but the applicant did provide a revised tree information report, so we no longer require that adjournment.
Okay, so you're looking for an adjournment to September 6th.
Yes, please.
Staff, that we can accommodate that. Okay. Again, would a panel member like to propose? Mr. Keklikian? Ms. Lequier is seconding. All those in favor? Granted, so that item is also adjourned.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay. It's now I think we can go back to item number 1, correct? Sorry? Oh, yes, sorry, you're right. Where did that disappear on my list here? Yeah, sorry. Item number 4, 47 Grosvenor Avenue.
Well, sure.
Good afternoon. Could I ask you to identify yourself?
I'm Jeff Kelly, planner with Novazak Engineering.
Thank you. There are a number of conditions that are being proposed, but am I correct in understanding that you agree to those conditions?
That is correct.
Okay. Does anyone have any comments? Either panel members, persons in the room here, or persons online? Or questions for that matter? Seeing none, does somebody wish to propose a resolution to this matter, or do we wish to hold it and discuss afterwards? So, Mr. Blatherwick is proposing we consent. Seconded, Mr. Keklian, Ms. Lequi. So all in favor? Okay, myself. So that application is granted.
Thank you very
Thanks
much.
very much. Right. Finally, I can get to item number 1. 567 McLeod Street.
Mr. Chair, my name is Chris Yalkatsi, acting for the owner.
Okay. I think on this one, and particularly given the nature of the concerns that are being raised by planning, we would appreciate a presentation of the intent behind the.
Excuse me, Mr. Chair, I understood that the planning staff had no concerns. Ms. McLeod?
Sorry, okay, 1 second. No, you're correct on this one, but actually we on the committee did have a couple of.
Okay, great.
And I think in fairness, we
Yes.
should just point out that I think the main degree of concern revolves around the garbage issue. Or have you? Oh. Yes, thank you. But anyway, if you could.
Yes, if you can put my presentation up, please. This is a small 8-unit apartment building. It's classified as a stacked apartment building because it is got individual entrances to each apartment at the grade level. One entrance at the front, which will also have a handicap lift, and then one entrance at the rear, and then 3 entrances on either side of the building. Next slide, please. Next slide. This is the character of the street massing. We've got another building that's fairly similar to what we're proposing. That's immediately west of the proposed property, and I've only massed out the buildings on either side to their rectangular massing. They do have sloped roofs in that case, but continue, please. The overall site and its location, it is surrounded by some small low-rise apartments and also single-family homes. At the rear of the property zoning is TM, so traditional Main Street. So we can expect that we will see taller buildings on the north side of the property. Next slide. We worked with the planning staff actually, and here's a case where the planning staff had a really great idea, and we were able to, as part of the plans, reduce the level of the entrances to the units on the west side of the property, so that we're able to ramp from the front to the rear with a 1:12 slope ramp, which is an acceptable wheelchair ramp, and that would actually be used for the garbage. So it is a comfortable ramp. It complies with the width requirements of 1.2 meters. So the garbage can be taken out directly to the street across those ramps. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Just to give you some idea of the units are actually reasonably generous. And what surprised me was when the client came to me and asked me for separate entrances, I said, that's next going to be impossible to do. And lo and behold, given the challenge, we actually did it. Next slide, please. So we have a mix of 1 and 2 bedroom units throughout the entire building. Next slide, please. So you can see the 2 and 1 bedrooms, and you can see the way the stairs work. The third floor units actually have a nice little landing on the second floor where they're going to be able to put their coats and hang their bicycles and things like that we have nowadays that we're seeing more of. Not everybody's using the rear storage for bicycles. Next slide, please. And that's the top floor. So next slide. A little bit of the massing. There's balconies on all of the units, and the window wells are actually quite short. On the side that the ramp is, there are no window wells at all. So there's nothing impeding access on that side of the property. Next slide. Next slide. Next slide. Next slide. This is a little bit of the rear or front elevation showing the stairs on one side. Next slide. And that's just a section through the building. The ceiling heights are regular 8 foot. The building's intended to be as affordable as we can. Modulink has actually been working on a process of how we're going to be constructing this. So this will actually be quite new to the city. Next slide, please. Yeah, I think that's the last slide. Next slide. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Now, do any of the committee members have any questions or comments? Oh, yes. Would you mind addressing the 4 tests?
Oh, 4 tests. The 4 tests are the variances considered minor. So there's one variance. So we had dropped 2 variances with regard, or was it 1 variance with regards to the garbage removal? So that's been taken away. The 2 variances have to do, 2 of the variances have to do with the fact that the definition of the building is a stacked apartment building. So under the zoning bylaw, the area requirement for a stacked apartment building is greater than that for a up to 10 unit apartment building. So the building actually fully complies and therefore should be considered as a minor variance, because from a characteristic perspective, the building is the same massing as what is permitted under the zoning bylaw. The reduction in the side yard to 1.2 meters on one side of the building, again, is a bit of a reflection of the character of the streets. We actually have homes that are and buildings that are much closer than that to the side property lines. So in all cases of the minor variances, they should be considered minor in the sense that they do not create a significant adverse impact. It fully complies with the zoning bylaw as apartment buildings are considered a use in that zone. It fully complies with the official plan in terms of intensification, gentle in terms of scale and size. And lastly, it complies with the provincial requirements and that development proceed in urban areas.
Okay, thank you. Do any of the committee members have any questions or comments they want to address at this time? Yeah, Ms. Lequier.
Yeah, my question, Mr. Chair, is for the applicant regarding, I noticed that you mentioned in your comments or your oral submissions about affordable housing. Are you applying to any of the government, city, provincial, or federal programs?
No, we're not. So Modulink is actually focused on trying to create market level affordable housing. So that's our aim, and our aim to do that is to build more affordably and build more intelligently. The benefit we're seeing through the concept of form-based zoning, which we will see, I'm pretty sure, in our next zoning bylaw, means that, you know, the combination of unit count matters less than does the massing. And so we're trying to design buildings that both have a higher bedroom count overall, either individually or collectively, and allow for that type of building to be built very, very cost effectively. And that's our approach. We're working potentially down the road and have spoken with the city and others where they might take a role, but my focus has always been we need to achieve affordability through an economics approach rather than through not administrative, an institutional approach. I guess that's what I'm looking to try to
You're
do.
looking for it to be financially viable. Yeah, okay.
Yes. Yeah.
Thank you.
Any other questions from panel members? No? Are there any questions or comments from members of the public, either here in the room or online? Okay, hearing none, I'd just like to confirm for the record that in your original application, there were the 4 requests and that you are removing item D.
Item D being the
The
requirement for
Part for the
garage.
movement of the garbage.
Yes,
Yeah, okay.
correct.
Thank you. Do you have anything else you wish to say before we
No,
finalize?
thank you.
Mr. Chair, we also need to amend the building type to a stacked dwelling and not a low-rise apartment building.
Oh, apologies. Yes, that was on
Oh,
there.
yeah, the wording.
Do we have the exact wording for that?
So it would be the owner wants to construct a 3-story, 8-unit stacked dwelling as shown on plans filed with the committee.
And you are aware of the conditions that that Pred has required, that the city has requested, and you're
Yes,
okay with those?
yes.
All right. I think on this one, we probably will reserve. And thank you very much for being here this afternoon.
Thank you.
Okay, so now item number 2. This is 451 Roosevelt Avenue. And I believe, actually, sorry, I should just go back to the previous item. I should just have confirmed that the city staff didn't wish to add anything on that one.
Mr. Chair, nothing to add on our end.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Sorry about that. So if you could identify yourself for the record, please.
Good afternoon, Chair. My name is Thomas Freeman. I'm with FOTEN Planning and Design, representing the owner of 451 Roosevelt Avenue.
Okay. I think on this one, we would appreciate a presentation if you don't mind.
Sure, I'm happy to give a presentation. Next slide, please. So as outlined in my report to the committee, the subject site is designated within the interurban transect and is designated as neighborhood and has an evolving overlay applied as shown on Schedule B2 of the official plan. The intended pattern of development in the interurban transect is urban, exhibiting the characteristics outlined in Table 6 of the official plan. Next slide, please. So we're proposing a stratified severance for the existing semi-detached building on the site. No changes to the built form are proposed. No development of that built form is proposed as part of this severance application. As you can see in the graphic, the existing semi has a jagged dividing wall between the two units. So through this application, we are proposing a stratified severance to divide along this existing wall. So as outlined in section 11.5, policy 5 of the official plan, the Committee of Adjustment shall consider strata conservance applications for both vertical and horizontal division, as it is authorized to do so under the Planning Act. So in this application, we are requesting both vertical and horizontal severance to facilitate the proposed severance of the existing semi. Next slide, please. So this is the servicing plan for the proposed severance. The existing servicing that crosses the proposed servicing line will be decommissioned, and a new line will be brought in from Ravenhill in the north corner of the building. The intention of this is to be away from the existing trees that are on Ravenhill in the corner and closer to the corner of the lot. So no easements are required for this application. The servicing will be completely separate for each proposed new lot. Next slide, please. So I just highlighted a few of the criteria under the Planning Act, which I outlined in my report. Section 5124 of the Planning Act establishes the criteria for severance of land as the proposal includes 2 severed lots and no public infrastructure. A plan of subdivision is not required for the orderly development of the lands. The proposed severance meets the criteria established in section 21 sub 24 of the Planning Act. Next slide, please. And the 4-part test. So as part of the severance application, we are also requesting a minor variance for the retained lot facing Roosevelt Avenue. Whereas the zoning bylaw requires a minimum lot area of 180 meters squared, we are requesting a lot area of 143.79 meters squared. The lot width meets the minimum lot width of 6 meters. So does the proposed maintain the general intent of purpose of the official plan? The proposed minor variance will permit the creation of 1 new lot that is consistent with the dense urban fabric within the urban neighborhood designation. And does the proposal maintain the general intent and purpose of the zoning bylaw? The proposed severance will facilitate the establishment of separate ownership of each principal unit in the existing semi-detached building which is a permitted use in the R4 UA zone. Is the proposal minor in nature? The proposed variance relates solely to the area of the proposed retained lot, which is consistent with the zoning bylaw and the surrounding neighborhood. No development is proposed as part of the proposed minor variance. Therefore, the proposed minor variance is not anticipated to generate any undue adverse impacts on the neighboring lands or the broader community. Therefore, it is our opinion that the minor variance will not be perceptible and it does not create an irregular or unacceptable lot pattern in the area. Therefore, the proposed variance is desirable for the appropriate use of the land. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Just to confirm that we do need to amend the notice of on this one. To read, the owner requires the committee's authorization for a minor variance from the zoning bylaw to permit a reduced. No, hang on. I think I'm on the wrong. Give me 1 second here. I got somebody. I'm sorry. For a minor variance from the zoning bylaw to permit a reduced lot area of 143.79 square meters for 1/2 of the semi-detached located on parts 1, 2, 6, and 8 on the draft R4 plan. Whereas the bylaw requires a minimum lot area of 180 square meters. I don't think that in any way changes the request you're making. It just corrects some wording there. Okay. Do any of the committee members have any comments or questions? Mr. Blatherwick?
Mr. Freeman, you said that there would be no easements associated with this consent. So as far as servicing of the site, you've mentioned water and sewer, excuse me. So there won't be any problems with hydro, HVAC systems, telecommunications.
No, my understanding is they'll be separate. They'll be built separately for each individual lot.
Okay. And so the the positive obligations that are going to be imposed on the owners of this property are going to be handled through a joint use and maintenance agreement and not a condo act application.
That's correct. I believe the conditions speak to that.
Do you contemplate that there'll be any, and I'm reading a line here, any conditions needed to ensure that the current and future owners will have equal rights and obligations of ownership?
No, I don't.
Okay. That's all, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Any other members have any comments or questions? No. Can I go to the city then, please? Ms. Alkatib, I believe, is the planner. Do you have any comments or any comments, Ms. Al-Khatib?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. No, I don't have any comments.
Okay. Any comments, questions, concerns from people here in the room or anybody online? Okay, not.
Mr.
Yeah.
Chair,
Yes.
Member Tremblay has her hand.
Oh, sorry, Member Tremblay, I didn't see.
That's interesting. I did. Now I want it to go up and be sort of seen. Okay.
For
I'll
what it's
lower
worth,
that.
Member Tremblay.
So,
For what it's worth, Member Tremblay, it was a mistake on my screen. My arrow was actually showing as a hand, and it was over your square on the. It wasn't at your end. It was at my end.
We're also getting very used to this, aren't we? So just Ms. Al-Khatib, I guess I have a question for you. So in looking at this, then there's no issues with any of the side yard setback requirements under the zoning. I just want to make sure that this doesn't create an issue from a zoning standpoint at all. Can you just confirm that?
No, there is no any any changes in the existing situation caused by the severance line.
Okay, so it's not like there's a legal non-conforming or any of that, right? So I understand what you're saying, but I just want to get a sense of, even if it's there, it would be legal non-conforming, but does it meet? Just out of curiosity more than anything else, because it looks really tight for a corner lot. That's why I was looking at it and thinking, I know it's an existing condition, but it really is from the corner side yard. Does it meet, just out of curiosity though?
No, the corner side yard and the front yard, both of them are not complying with the zoning bylaw. But seeing a severance application, we look only for the impacts coming from the severance line of severance.
I understand. That's fine. Okay, and so just a question to the applicant. Sorry. Can you, and maybe you covered this, and my apologies if you did. What's intended for the severed parcel? So what kind of led to the request for this severance, both stratified and horizontal, vertical? Can you tell me then why, what's being proposed for that severed parcel?
Yeah, so it's an existing semi-detached dwelling. So there's 2 dwellings there now that are leased. The intent is to sell them as separately conveyable parcels, and they're working with the existing built form and the existing wall structure of the building. So the severance line follows that existing common wall between the 2 existing units, and that's why we have an interesting situation where there's both vertical and horizontal severances.
So I just for the record, I'm not against stratified severances in any way, and I do believe the committee has every authority to deal with them. In this case, though, I've seen a number of stratified severances over the years, and it's always been pretty logical, separating either a cantilevered portion of one residential over the other, or whether it was to divide up a commercial space from a residential space in a building, from a podium to a second floor or something like that. I've never seen it used for something like this, for essentially a demising wall, I guess, between 2 residential units that essentially comprise a semi. And I was actually struck with just how complicated that wall is between the 2 units. It's not it's not what we would have seen as typical. And certainly, obviously, the semi was never built with any intent to ever do this, because I would have thought that whoever would have built the unit would have made sure that they had a much cleaner line on this, and that you wouldn't be into strata severances on this. So I do appreciate your report. You had quite a bit of information about that, but I'm wondering if you had any experience with this in the past. Is there going to be concerns about, because it is a bit confusing, that demising wall. So do you have previous experience with this? Can you tell us how prospective landowners have reacted to it? I'm just a bit concerned about the nature of the, I guess, the stratified portions.
Yeah, our firm has done a number of stratified consents for different reasons. This one is unique. There are differences between each level, but I think when you're in the semi, you realize that although the wall appears to be jagged, it's based on a common wall that although the plans appear almost like a Tetris, it was a bit complicated trying to prepare the draft plan, but I think it does follow the logical line of the existing structure.
So if you're in the units, do you actually see those jagged? Like, do you see those different components floor to floor? Are they perceivable?
From my understanding, no, they're not perceivable. I think it's the orientation of the staircase, and each floor is different. But for looking at each floor, it's built that way.
Okay, so let me just ask one last question. And if that's the case, then would there have been a way to sever it? Like, if it doesn't look like, if all of this is happening sort of within two spaces, would it not have been possible to simply sever it straight without having to go with sort of the complicated blocking of this?
From my understanding, is those are structural walls. We would have to demolish the building and rebuild a semi in order to facilitate a straight line on the plan. I think this works with the existing structure in a way that facilitates the severance as proposed.
Okay, what I'm guessing then is that it is perceivable from the interior. Okay, all right, thank you. Those are my questions.
Thank you, Member Tremblay. I do have a question for Ms. Al-Khatib. We did receive a comment from somebody in the public questioning the zoning of this, but at least part of this land. Can you confirm the zoning of the entire piece of land currently, and assuming the severance goes through, whether there will be any change to that zoning?
There will be no change for the zoning. It's an R4 UA with an exception 2,686 and a height maximum of 8.5.
Okay, thank you very much. Are there any more questions, comments? Anybody, member of the public?
Yes, hello.
Yes, please.
Okay, yes, thank you, Mr. Chair and members. So my name is Ian, and I'm representing myself and my wife, Tracy, and we live next door. So just a few comments. We're definitely looking forward to a resolution, or kind of, moving forward on something of this, because we know that the property has kind of been in flux for a little while, which I think puts a lot of stress on everybody. But just a few things that kind of strikes us from our perspective. The first thing is, while it is a decent sized parcel currently, when you cut it in half and you don't do it down the middle, it becomes kind of a strange and irregular type of parcel of lot. So I would actually question the test number 4 in terms of whether or not it is irregular. And just looking at, and I can also say that I've been inside the house, and there certainly is, it is definitely visible in terms of the way that the split is. And it would be interesting to see if that's kept, what would happen with the severed part in terms of its desirability as something to sell. We certainly don't want to end up in a situation where we have something that isn't fit for purpose in terms of a lot that's been severed and nothing can be dealt with it, because we know what happens to those lots. But we're especially concerned with severing something in such an irregular way and then that leading to a continued zoning of R4, where you have two R4s on the edge of the street. If anyone's been on that part of Ravenhill, there's essentially three houses. So we have the current R4, which is the house in question. We have our house, and we have another house. So what we're saying is, why are we going to have two R4s to the west of us? R4s, as far as I understood, is supposed to be on the corner. And now we have a developer who's intending to create an R4 and then put another R4 right beside it, one in which there's very little space at all. So to me, we're kind of looking at like what's going on with our street here. You know, if you want to develop an R4 on the corner, develop the R4 on the corner. But this is a very bizarre, irregular plan, which I think is going to end up potentially packing the street in a bizarre way, or not even doing that, because no one will really want that bizarre kind of irregular lot. So those are the concerns that we have. And of course, lots of children are playing on the street. It's a thoroughfare for pedestrians that are going to and from Churchill Elementary. And you know, we don't even want to start about parking, because it's very, very tight there. So yeah, I think from a neighbor perspective, we have a lot of concerns with this. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments? So would you like to address anything that the
Sorry,
Mr.
Chair?
Mr. Trevelyan, go ahead.
That's okay. I was actually, Mr. Spiegel's comments are really interesting. And so it kind of raised with me another question for our applicant. Is there any proposal to demolish that building in the future once we get these severances?
There's no proposal to demolish the building. The severance before you is inextricably tied to the structure of the building now. So we would not be proposing a demolition through this severance application.
Okay, so it's not something you've talked to your clients about in terms of future work on the property or future interventions on the property?
It's not part of this application, no.
Well, I'm not asking about whether it's part of this application. I'm asking about whether there's any future plans to be looking at demolition of the building.
I can't comment on the future plans.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Sorry, I'm Jacob Bolduc. I'm also with FOTEN.
Okay.
I'm here with Thomas. I'm happy to take that question through you, Mr. Chair, from Member Tremblay. Short answer is, if we were looking to redevelop this parcel in the near future, we wouldn't be proceeding with this strata severance. We're creating a lot line that for any redevelopment potential under the R4, we would have to remove that line effectively. To benefit from the R4 provisions, the different permitted uses, for example, a low-rise apartment building is tied to a minimum lot size. So by severing the lot and creating two semi-detached parcels, we're effectively limiting what is developable on this lot under the R4 zoning. If in the future the properties are reacquired, or if the current owner wanted to redevelop the parcel, they would effectively have to demolish the structure, dissolve that lot line, and either meet the zoning bylaw or submit a zoning bylaw amendment or minor variance applications to support that new proposal. So if there was an immediate redevelopment plan, we wouldn't be here for the strata severance.
Thank you. Ms. Tremblay, does that answer your question?
Yep. Thank you very much.
Welcome. Yes, if you'd like to give you an opportunity to close in a second, but I do just also want to confirm, though, that there are a number of conditions that you're aware of and you're able to comply with all of those.
Yes, we're aware of the conditions and we have spoken with staff on those and we agree to the conditions.
Okay, thank you. So anything else you'd like to say?
Just regarding the R4 UA zoning, I'm looking at the map for Ravenhill, and the entire north portion of Ravenhill is zoned R4 UA exception 2685 height. 8.5 meters. So we're not an exception on Ravenhill. It's across the entire northern portion of the street.
Okay. Unless there are any additional questions or comments. Seeing none, then I think we will reserve on this one. We need to wrap our minds around it a little bit. So thank you very much. Appreciate your time. Next item is number 6 on the agenda, which is 24 Lowry Street. Yeah. Okay. Member Blatherwick has just reminded me that I should just remind you, even though we did say it at the beginning, that the decision, if we reserve, will be released within 10 days.
My name is Chris Yelkotzi. I'm acting on behalf of the owners of 24 Lowry.
I think on this one, again, we would appreciate a presentation if you don't mind.
Not at all. Presentation, yeah. Next slide, please. The property is in Hintonburg. It's on one of the older streets, a bit of a hill street as well, which is kind of interesting. It is surrounded by, again, a mix of single detached dwellings and also some low-rise apartment buildings. The zoning is an R4 zoning. It's part of the inner suburban Transact area in the official plan. Next slide, please. This just gives you a bit of a footprint for the site. Next slide, please. And this is the actual survey of the site showing the addition that exists at the rear of the property at this time. The building historically is an older building with an addition that was built probably in the last 30 years. The original building was built much sooner earlier than that. And so the intention is to retain the existing front of the building intact in its entirety, including the wraparound porch, which is a very prominent architectural feature of buildings in that period. It has no heritage merit. However, the owner is choosing to retain that front portion of the building while expanding the use of the building within the zoning bylaw requirements. Next slide, please. This gives you an idea of the building and the wraparound porch. So everything right up to the peaked roof on the right side of the slide will be retained. The porch will be retained and rebuilt. It's, you know, as buildings get older, they get a little dilapidated, but in this case, the modernization of the entire building will occur as part of the addition to the building. So one of the minor variances relate to the requirement under the low-rise apartment building to have a percentage of window area, a minimum window area in this property is less than that. Next slide, please. The other two variances relate to, again, the keeping of the existing building. One variance is for side yard. So that's on the east corner of the building. And the other variances deal with the desire to keep the property pretty much the way it is currently in the front of the property, where there is one parking space at this time. And what we've done here, and bear with me a little bit, I've been working with clients for some time to try to retain the existing streetscape character in buildings as much as possible. So when clients come to me about doing something where we're able to maintain the front of the building to as close to possible to the historic nature of it, I kind of get quite happy because we're bringing that type of infill without destroying the neighborhood. We did flyer the neighborhood, and I spoke with actually two of the neighbors. We spoke with the community association as well about this issue with garbage. The zoning bylaw is succinct because effectively it's designed for apartment buildings with quite a number of units. And here we're going to be dealing with 6 units. We're dealing with regulations where a car width is assumed to be 1.6 meters when the average North American vehicle is actually closer to 2 meters in width. We have a distance of 1.8 meters between the edge of the porch and the property line. So we don't comply with the garbage requirement of 1.2 meter clear path. The exiting of the property has been checked with the Ontario Building Code requirements with the City of Ottawa Building Code examiner. And the exiting of the apartments will actually be technically, I'm going to say technically, through the veranda on the west side of the property. So you will climb up the steps technically, but I can imagine that for the most part, people are just going to walk down the roughly 0.8 meters of width. And to give you a sort of scale on that, a 0.8 meter width is that of a regular 2'8" door, okay, which you would normally use to travel back and forth. So there is the possibility of passing between the two, although from a technical perspective, it's not. We could completely comply if we eliminated that veranda, but that veranda is very important to the architecture of this building. And the parking space is also important to the owner of that property. I think this is a very, very sensitive infill proposal with a 3-story addition at the rear. And I think it meets all of the tests and adds, in this sense, to the community the retention of what I would say is a really nice building. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ms. Al-Khatib, I understand that the city does have some concerns about this application.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, we do like for the 2 minor variances regarding using the parking space as a path for the garbage containers. And the other one is the parking itself.
Okay. And nothing that you've just heard changes that concern?
So like from planning perspective, it's kind of having this car in this place, it's totally blocking the passage of the other people coming from the 4 units in the rear. So normally it would be supported as it's complying with the streetscape character and it's retaining good stuff there, but choosing to create extra units like 4 units in the rear, so these people have the right to like have an accessible way to go out of this property, especially that the proposal contains like the satisfying amount of bicycle parkings. So like how will person like carry his bike and go over the stairs and go out of the balcony? So like it's not accessible for people to go out, like it's from the safety perspective, it's not accessible for people. And on the other side, for garbage containers, like how will they go out if it's blocked with a car all of the time?
Okay, thank you very much. Do members of the committee have Mr. Blatherwick?
Ms. Al-Khatib, we understand your concerns regarding pedestrian access. Are there any concerns that there may be violations of the fire code with this site plan, the way it's been drawn up?
I don't have information about that.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chair, I can actually answer the question because we actually had, when I first saw the plans from the architect, I asked him to make sure that he checked with Building Code Services about any concerns around fire access or anything like that, because I thought there might be some, and there aren't any. That's been clarified, and I did submit that information to you.
Okay. Any other committee, any other committee members got with questions or comments? Ms. Lequier?
Yes, thank you. So just to confirm, when we're looking at the site property, the entrance that is where the parking the parked car could be at this time. That is not access to an entrance to any type of unit, but rather to storage.
Yes, it's confirmed. I actually had to have that double checked, but that access there is simply to the storage space in the basement.
Okay.
Mr. Chair.
Ms. Tremblay?
Well, my colleagues were on the same page with me because both questions I had have essentially been asked. But so Mr. Yelkotz, I guess the only thing I want to confirm then is, and this isn't a bylaw issue, but when we have things like parking blocking accesses, the first thing that came to my mind, of course, is that the units wouldn't be available to anybody with any mobility issues or other accessibility limitations. But I think you've just confirmed that it is only to the storage area and not to any units that pathway leads to in terms of an access.
Just to, Mr. Chair, just to correct this, there are 4 entrances to the 4 apartments being added to the rear that have access through legal access and safety access, fire code access through the veranda of the existing building. And so that there is access past those buildings. And all I want to do in terms of commenting around this car, you know, I've lived in a number of small apartment buildings where there's 3, 4, 6 units. We know each other. I've lived in one where I know each other, and you know, we have to take the garbage out. Well, we actually move the car out of the way. It's not a big deal. In many cases, people share keys. We're trying to create a social environment, and these smaller buildings are the ones that really do create that social environment where people work together to solve the issues on their site. And if they have a problem with somebody or somebody else, they talk to each other. And I do see that a lot. I did a project quite some time ago, which was a severance on a common element, which was 10 units, all having to sort of cohabitate together to manage the way that they operated. And I think our rules are important, but they're important for larger projects. I think they're less important for these smaller projects, especially when there is a significant benefit to the community in the retention of a wonderful little building at the front.
Ms. Lecrier, was that another question you had?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate your comments with respect to trying to create more supply, which is obviously needed in our community, as well as, you know, the desire for people to work together. It's a noble goal. I guess my concern is when I'm looking at the plans and I look at the property, you know, a logical person, if they're going to wheel down some garbage or their bicycle, they're going to be going down. It's a shared driveway with the adjacent neighbor. And so if there's a car in my way, if I'm going to be trying to come down, I'm going to be going into the neighbor's area. Have you heard from the neighbor that shares the driveway in that and discussed this plan with them?
Mr. Chair, through you, Mr. Chair, no, we haven't heard from the neighbor. We did flyer the neighboring homes and didn't hear anything. I did talk with the developer. And so one of the aspects that we would be amenable to, because I did talk to him about putting a fence down the property line. And so there has been some discussion about doing that, and it's certainly something that we would consider if the committee is concerned. However, again, I really, good fences make good neighbors. Low fences also help people talk to each other. So I'm a little loath to do fences, but because it's been working, there've been 3 units here and it's been working. They've been managing it. Then one of the units had access from the rear. We're adding 3 more. That's it.
I appreciate that. And Robert Frost, I'm sure will also appreciate his quote being used time and time again. Hypothetically, if the committee were to not approve the parking variance, would you, I believe you were making the connection that the veranda is being retained. And if you would be able to comply if you remove the veranda. So if the committee does not approve, I believe it's C and D as the minor variances, what would be next steps? Would you have to use the veranda to create it, or would you just redesign it in a different way?
Through you, Mr. Chair, we've actually had that conversation quite well. I'm loath to want to change. We're trying as much as possible to keep the character as it stands, and I don't disagree that removing the parking space is an option that we've discussed, and it's not a preferred option on the part of the developer. Were you to remove those the permission to that parking space, then I think they would still proceed as it stands. However, in saying that, we would also like to entertain a way, and again, this is if you've seen the pictures on my submission, this is a very tight street. There's only parking on one side of the street. There's not a lot of parking in that neighborhood at all, and we're talking about one car for 6 units. Yes, most units will use bicycles and that sort of thing, but at least if they choose to have a shared car, for instance, that ends up parking there or something like that. I did a project on 25 Grant where we have 2 cars in tandem, also in this ward, that was approved through a site plan control and rezoning application. This is akin to that to some degree. A little bit more understanding that people will talk to each other, work together to resolve issues, I think goes a long way, rather than us having to necessarily legislate everything that we do to the nth degree.
No, I appreciate that. Just if I could continue, Mr. Chair, of my last question / comment, Member Tremblay raised, I believe it was Member Tremblay, or maybe perhaps it was the city planner that raised the comment about accessibility. And I would just also point out that, if I'm trying to get a stroller around here, with a vehicle in the way, I do have concerns about the public interest with respect to accessibility of the units. And I'll just it's just more of a commentary at this point.
I'm not sure that we count as a court of competent jurisdiction for the purposes of, I believe it's Section 5 of the Ontario Evidence Act. So I may be asking you to make an admission against interest here, but if there is currently a vehicle being parked on this driveway and you are seeking, or the owner is seeking a variance to allow parking on a lot less than 450 square meters, when parking is not supposed to be allowed on lots less than 450 square meters, are you aware of anything that would suggest that the existing parking has been authorized at some point?
Mr. Chair, I'm not certain. I don't know if planning staff did a review to see if there is a private approach agreement on that site. I did not myself check to see if there's a private approach agreement. It is a depressed curb, so I suspect that there's a private approach agreement on that parking space. A private approach or complies with the private approach bylaw. Again, Mr. Chair, I think that if it comes up that this is an illegal parking space, then I think I'm pretty sure the client will just lawn it over, which I think the community association would love, and to some degree I would love as well. However, there is the option, and that's why I say I'm so betwixt in between. I struggle with it from the perspective of, we have cars, we need a couple of spaces here and there for them. We don't need a ton of spaces. And this is a really tight area for cars. And so I think the other thing the client would be quite happy to do is to turn this into a sponge, as we've been hearing about over the last couple of days, due to the flooding that we've had. And certainly I've been working with all of my clients to find ways of creating parking spaces that are sponges instead of surface runoff.
Well, I appreciate your candor. in my short time here on the committee, parking, I think, has reared its ugly head in one way, shape or form on almost every single application that we've heard. So with that, Ms. Hode, I know you've been waiting patiently and you have indicated you have some concerns. So I'll invite you to speak.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. As you know, we submitted a response in an objection to the granting of the variances for the parking, mainly because it is not permitted in the R4 zone. I can confirm, or I can suggest to you, I guess I can't confirm, the current use of the property does not forbid parking. So this would be, I think, a legal parking space. There's a driveway that leads to the rear. I think the neighbor actually may have a parking garage in the rear. So the question is the change of use. It is a change of zoning since that building was built. So it is not permitted. I refer you to the photograph submitted by Mr. Yalkotsky with showing the car parked in the driveway. I know he says that the dimensions will work. When I looked at that photo, I thought, oh, there's the cars parked very close to the veranda porch, and there's not much space between the car and the property line. So I think that it's very risky to consider that this parking space would work. It is possible that neighbors could, or the residents could cooperate. They might not. And I have heard from a colleague of mine that in fact the current tenants are walking on the neighboring properties property there, that on the shared driveway, which is, I think, what we would expect people to do. I don't know if you've noted, I don't think it's in Mr. Yalkowski's photo, but the house, adjacent house sharing the driveway is currently for sale. Now, this may mean it's going to stay as is, and I don't know, it's probably at least a duplex, if not more. Almost all the houses in this neighborhood are multi-unit, up to from 2 to who knows. So I think there is a possibility of redevelopment of the property next door, and it could become untenable. I guess that would be my submission. And the other thing, I certainly would support Mr. Yalkowski's suggestion about a sponge. And in fact, we have asked, should well, there are two things. We would like permeable paving or permeable surfaces where the parking is not located, which would mean the rest of the driveway going back to the rear, towards the rear of the property where landscaping is proposed. And also, should that parking be permitted, some way to ensure that parking does not occur beyond the parking space that you may or may not make legal. I think it would be difficult because there have been steps added now down from the porch, which I believe were not in the original plan that we were shown. So those are my submissions, subject to your questions.
I would have a question for you, Ms. Hode. If you're not able to answer it, absolutely fine. I know that we are able to impose whatever conditions we believe are required to ensure compliance with, whatever our decision is. Given that the parking space seems to be the fundamental issue underlying both C and D, if the committee were to deny C and D, on what basis do you think, if you have thought about it, would we be able to link a conditional of the creation of a physical barrier to a variance that deals with percentage of windows on the front facade and the interior side yard setback?
The R4UB bylaw requires that of any new construction, this is a new addition, but it is required in the bylaw that there be bollards or planters, something located in the front yard to prevent parking in the front yard, which this almost is.
Okay, thank you for that. Let me, before I do actually turn to you, let me see if is there anybody else who wishes to speak to this. Is Ms. or Mr. Brody online? I know they submitted some concerns earlier. No. Okay, so I guess hearing no, and anybody else, member of the public, wish to make any comments? Okay, I guess with that, Mr. Yelkowski, I'll put it over to you to make any closing comments you might like to make. We've had you on the hot seat for a while.
Yes, Mr. Chair. Number one, absolutely agree. There's two things that we can do. Number one, we could physically delineate the parking space to the space that has been shown on the site plan, and the remainder of the property be done in such a fashion as per what Ms. Hode had indicated, to ensure that there's no parking in any other area. I think putting a fence up on the property line, I don't agree necessarily that the development of the property adjacent, they will end up either with a 1.2 meter or 1.5 meter setback, because in all likelihood, if they redevelop that as a low-rise apartment building, similar to the building that was built to the east of this property. And I did reference that property because that's the kind of development that we're getting. And what I'm trying to encourage the committee and the community as a whole to think about when we have proposals come forward to retain some of those bits and pieces, and a developer makes significant investment in terms of constructing an addition to the rear of the property to add units. That we also consider. I'll just refer you to one thing. In the Ontario Building Code, there's an interesting section called Part 11, and I'm not sure that you're aware of it as planners, but Part 11 in the Building Code allows there to be irregular application of Part 9 of the Building Code. In other words, there are things when you're trying to renovate the building and change a building, they grant you a little more latitude as part of how that you do that, and really try to stick to, I guess, the highest level of safety, but at the same time, stairwells don't have to be quite so wide, treads don't have to be quite the same, et cetera, et cetera. And what I'm suggesting to you here, that you as the committee are the arbitrator of this type of an approach here. And I know I've got clients of many existing beautiful little buildings, and I'm trying to work with them. And I'm hoping that you would consider that this is a judicious application of your authority. Thank you.
Okay, Ms. Tremblay, you wanted to add something?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. My apologies for the lateness in my my additional question. So, Mr. Yelkowski, you were saying that the driveway is a shared driveway. Can you confirm that?
It's not a shared driveway from a legal perspective, because the width of the access to the for the person to the garage going to the rear is wide enough so that you could effectively build a fence down the property line, and they would still have access to their garage. I don't know if it would fully comply with the width requirement under the zoning bylaw, but I imagine it does. I mean, the benefit that owner currently has with the fact that, it's a paved area jointly is that they do probably, cross over each other's boundary on a, wintertime, summertime, regular basis. And as far as I understand it, I mean, I haven't seen or anybody talk, or any of the neighbors or anybody that I flyered came to me and said, well, this is a problem. We see fights or something like that. I haven't seen any of that.
No, so I guess what I want to explore is, if we were to say we would want to put up some barriers in some way to ensure that there wasn't any more of the space used for parking, is that a problem? Is that going to impede the functionality for access to the neighbor? That's what I really need to understand.
I mean, I think obviously it would to some degree, because now when he's removing his snow or trying to access his property, he's going to have the issue of a fence standing there or some bollards or something like that. If we do it, I think the suggestion would be to do it with a series of bollards that in a sense, I mean, I really truly can't answer the question from the perspective of I probably could look at the survey. I didn't look at the survey to see the distance from that side property line to the adjacent house to our property line. But when I was there and walked the property, it appeared to be enough to drive a regular car down. I mean, I lived at one time in 2nd Avenue, and I had a shared laneway, which was just barely wide enough to get my little Toyota pickup truck down when if I folded in the mirrors. And we managed. It's I would like, I think my understanding from my client, we had some conversation around this, is we're trying to keep this as simple as possible, collegially as possible, and non-regulatory as possible. But I think there's something to be gained by maybe delineating things in such a way that that people really know what they're doing, because right now you don't.
All right, so maybe Ms. Al-Khatib, don't know whether or not, Ms. Al-Khatib, you've had a chance to look at that. Do you have any insight at all that on whether or not erecting some barriers to prevent additional parking would be an issue from either a zoning standpoint or functionality standpoint for the neighbor?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So you mean blocking something to not park at the neighbor's driveway?
Yeah, because my understanding from the discussion we just had with Mr. Yelkatsi is that it's fairly tight. There's nothing to suggest that there's sufficient. Well, there's nothing to suggest one way or the other. I guess that's why I'm asking. Is there is that laneway sufficiently size to allow, because it's not a shared, so we heard from him, it's not a shared driveway, which means that presumably that neighbor has the space to get by. I just don't know if we put up bollards, do we create an issue? I need to explore that a little bit.
So what I can see from the plans is that the parking is blocking the site itself. So about the neighbor, I would think it would be better the neighbor would discuss that between them. I can't judge what's gonna happen there, but the side yard for the neighbor is smaller than the interior side yard for the proposed site.
All right. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair,
just one second, Mr. Trombley. Mr. Chancellor, Mr. Bladderwick, just Member Bladderwick had, I think, a follow-up to this.
Could we put the site plan for this project up on the screen, please? Yeah, Mr. Jalkatsu, what's the distance between the porch and the property line at the front of the property?
1.8 meters or 2.8 meters, excuse me.
2.8. And a standard city parking space is 2.6 by 5.2?
Is 2.6, correct?
By 5.2, so you could fit a
Yes.
standard parking space onto your property
Yeah.
between the porch and the property line.
Yes, through you, Mr. Chair.
But there's no room, pardon me, for people coming from the new units at the back to walk on level ground to the street unless they cross over onto the neighbor's property or walk up onto the front porch that surrounds the front of the building.
Through you, Mr.
If there was a
Chair,
car parked there.
that assumes that car width is a standard 2.6 meters, and it's not. So the average car width is 2 meters. And, when you have a parking space that's 2.6 meters, when you have two cars parked, and you have a space between them that you walk through. And so what I'm suggesting to you here is that space that's usually there, and you need also maybe remember that the parking zoning bylaw parking allows a minimum, a smaller parking space down to 2.4 meters under, a certain percentage when you do multiple cars. So it's not like this isn't a physical impossibility. We're looking at something between around, as I indicated, around 0.8 meters in width that people could pass through. If we do put up some sort of barrier to keep them from moving through.
Sorry, that would be though, providing the person actually parks in the middle of their parking spot. Sorry, to one side of their parking spot. If they parked in the middle, if you've got 2.8 and the car's 2, then you've got 40 centimeters on either side, which isn't a lot of space. Let's just say it's not a lot of space.
I understand, but through you, Mr. Chair, I mean, if that happens I just had a little apartment building where I had 4 cars in a very tight space and we had to walk down between them to get in and out. And if the neighbor didn't, or if one of the my tenants at the time didn't park very well, we had a chat about it and they parked better. This is why there's only 6 people in the building. But just to address the issue of the neighboring property, we do actually have the existing property to the west shown. There is a bit of a landing and a series of stairs there that actually narrows their side down. So they would have to probably remove that landing if they wanted to access their garage. Although they might be able to get through again with a regular vehicle. It's probably looks to me on the plan at about 2.6 meters in total, or 2.7 meters. Unfortunately, my variance number eliminated but it's on the survey plan that you have. So you have the dimension on the survey plan to that side yard. Unfortunately, I didn't give that in my presentation, so we can't put it up.
Perhaps just from me as well. Do you have any idea what size the garbage containers that need to be able to be presumably wheeled from the back of the property to the street would be?
Yes, Mr. Chair. The type of garbage container that generally gets used in these things is around 0.6 to 0.8 meters in width. And they're about twin wheel. They're usually about 0.8 meters to 1 meter in depth.
So again, just if the car, assuming there's a car parked there and the car is 2 meters, if it is either butting up against the property line or butting up against the wall or whatever is on the other side there, then there would be just enough to wheel the car through.
See, garbage gets through you, Mr. Chair. Garbage gets removed once a week.
No, fair enough.
And
it can be planned for. It can be planned for.
Yeah, it can be planned for and it can be discussed, and it's not like we're doing this every day. And so, again, I encourage the committee to think a little bit about how these kinds of buildings can function and how far we need to, as Western scientific thinking people, intercede into how people function. I mean, we can encourage green space. We can do a number of things that hopefully give them pride about the place that they live in, and they want to take care of it.
Okay. Unless you have anything else that we haven't heard yet. I think we've talked parking for quite a while. Anything? One last go around. Anything from my fellow members? Oh, Mr. Keckler.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Jalkowski, in your presentation, I think you mentioned a number of options were being thought of, including the parking, removal of parking. And you also mentioned, if I recall correctly, that the porch was a very important feature that the property owner wants to retain or would prefer to retain. Is that correct?
That's correct. Mr. Chair, through you, I did a lot of work. I was a sustainable development specialist for the federal government, and I did a lot of heritage work because I had to work with heritage buildings every day and with the heritage staff of the city. And I've done a number of heritage applications as well. This isn't a heritage building, but it's a beautiful classical little example of a building like that. I wouldn't want to touch one piece of it.
No, I appreciate that, I understand that. But in what I'm trying to get at, I guess, is my curiosity in your thinking or thought process of the various options. Was there any thought given to redoing the porch or retaining that character, but sort of repositioning it or redesigning it?
Through you, Mr. Chair, the massing of that porch ties in with a gable end at the end of the property, so kind of tough to do. But I think maybe to answer another question for you, how do I rank the various things that the committee could do? And the worst case scenario from my client's perspective, would be to remove the parking. The next best one would be to put a fence and bollards in such a fashion that we limit the parking to only the other area, and we landscape absolutely the rest of the property, although it already fully complies with the landscaping requirements from that zone in terms of as it is currently stands. But and last is to rely somewhat on some soft means. Now, I guess you sort of have to rely on me to encourage the client to do that. Soft means both of vegetating the part of the property that is not required for any parking. And I can assure you that's going to happen. Okay, that'll happen because this client and architect that I work with, they do listen to me on that stuff. And so we would limit it to that, and we would also do the permeable pavement as part of that. And obviously, you know, we always use textures to try to indicate use. And so we would work on putting a plan together that would, and so normally we'd be, you know, under site plan requirement here, you know, before Bill 23. But we will apply the same principles.
Thank you.
Ms. Tremblay, you had another one.
Yeah, sorry, I just wanted to, so Mr. Yamakatsu, it is possible for us to impose a condition as part of this. So, and it would be tied to plans. So we could say we absolutely want to have these features added to the site plan and then make the approval conditional to that. So we do have an ability to go there and but we appreciate that you have a lot of influence. So that's good. All right. And I think what I heard from you as well is that your if one or the other had to be sacrificed, your client would prefer retaining the veranda and dispensing with the parking space. Is that correct?
Absolutely.
All right. Okay. Thank you. And by the way, I did have a chance to look, and this is not, you know, but I had a look to see how that landing space in the neighbor's yard compared to the smallest dimension that we have on your, and it looks like it's less than 2.6 meters from what I could see. Can't tell you what it is, but it looks to be tighter, which means that it there must be, without there being any kind of easement provision or anything, there definitely seems to be use of that laneway as a shared resource, even though it's not legalized that way. But I think based on what I'm looking at, if we tried to put any kind of fence line down, it would definitely create a problem for that neighbor. And I take it that landing is actually got a door to it, right? So it's not like you can take the landing out, I don't think. Is that correct?
For you, Mr. Chair, I don't know. I wish I could answer that question, but I can't answer it.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. I think it's probably pretty clear that we're going to reserve on this one. Thank you very much for the presentation and your time. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Chair and committee, for your indulgence.
Okay. So the next item is item 8, 185 Hinton Avenue North. So this is Ms. Mallon, are you here or thank you.
Good afternoon, committee, Chair. My name is Jay Lim from 258 Architecture and Urban Design. I am representing the owner, Bridget Mallon, on this minor variance for a height variation for a coach house at 185 Hinton Avenue.
So I don't think we need a full-blown presentation, but I guess the issue is, can you know, basically, if you could explain why you need the additional height, because that obviously is what's in play here.
Yeah. Basically, we are looking to add a second story to an existing You can fit your Barbie in there. No.
Were you a former teacher? My mother was a teacher and always talked about visual aids bringing into the classroom for the kids.
I did not make this.
We were looking to get a variance for the height in order to put a second story coach house suite in there. The client is looking to increase density in the area, and we're hoping to use the existing footprint of the building in order to accommodate that. Currently, the zoning does not permit for that height, but we are trying to be in line with the recommendations of the city at 6.1 meters in order to accommodate that second floor. Okay. Do any of the members have any questions or comments they'd like to raise? Yeah. Mr. Blathwick?
Just wondering, Mr. Lim, what's the need for the garage? Given the size and the length of the driveway?
There was always a garage on that site. There's currently the footprint slab there. I guess at some point in time it deteriorated and came down. So the idea would be to park in there so that you don't have to shovel snow off your car in the winter time.
So you're basically maintaining a use that was already established.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
And Ms. Lequier?
Yes, thank you. Just wanted to clarify I believe in the application, there was a mention of affordable affordable housing in looking to create more affordable housing. Is there any plans to apply to any of the government, whether it's city, provincial, or federal programs that support additional affordable housing, garden suites, secondary suites, coach houses?
We have looked into it. We haven't gone to that process. Once we can confirm we can build this, absolutely, we're going to look into all those opportunities available.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. Now, are there any members of the public who wish to make any comments?
Sorry.
Oh, sorry, Ms.
Mr. Chair. Okay, that's all right. Just a quick question then to the applicant. Can you tell me a little bit about the consultation you undertook with the neighbors to on either side and in the back?
Absolutely. In the presentation that we provided, which is available, there are letters of support from all the adjacent neighbors. Ms. Mallon has gone around and spoken to each one of them, either individually or through email. That it's also included in the presentation. We do have letters of support from all of them, from most of them at least, and then that are around. And so there has been consultation with the neighbors who we have direct sight onto the building. We have also demonstrated through the presentation that there would be no real negative effect on their adjacent properties. So I don't know if the presentation is that warranted, but we're happy to go through that if you need to.
Okay, well, I guess I just need confirmation. I'm looking at
yes,
there's
correct.
some concerns from some neighbors at 183,
correct,
which is next door. So I find that interesting. If you can tell me a little bit about, are you aware of the concerns from the neighbors at 183?
Yes, we are.
Oh,
If you could push the microphone, please, and if you could identify yourself for the record, please.
Okay, my name is Bridget Mallon. I'm the owner of the home. And I guess before Jay speaks for me, he knows everything, but I just want to let you know that my relationships with my neighbors are primary, and I'm doing my best to address their concerns. I really care about the relationships more than the coach house. Thank you.
So there are,
right.
Sorry.
Go ahead. No, go ahead. That's fine.
183 is to the north of the site, correct? And so we have Bridget has spoken to them, and we have tried to have meetings with them in order to show them the project. This project has been circulated to everyone via email, so they have had a chance to see it. We have had comments about shadows and concerns about that. We have done our own analysis and demonstrated that the existing structures and trees on site actually cast a larger shadow than the actual building in itself. So we are happy to share that information with them. We want to make sure that they can feel comfortable that this project will not impede and distract from their current enjoyment.
And does that apply also to 181 Hinton?
Yeah, so they're side by side. They're side by sides. So you'll see if further down in the presentation, we've done a shadow study in order to ease their concerns. So you can see on the left-hand side, the conditions right now as it stands with the existing structures. On the one on the right-hand side, the little black dot is the new coach house. What you do not see here is the large mature tree directly to the east of there that actually creates a larger shadow, but we've just modeled the existing buildings. You'll see the existing shadows and the proposed shadows are not much different from each other. And in the timelines that the email that was sent out stated, we wanted to make sure that we compared apples to apples for everyone in the committee.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Lacuille?
Yeah, two questions. One would be for the applicant or the owner. Is there an intended occupant already identified for this, or is that sometimes people create coach houses for family members? I'm just curious if that's the case here to create multi-generational housing or not.
No, my intention is to have a long-term, like an annual tenant. It's not for my family.
Okay.
My kids would love to live there, but they can't afford it. They're 17 and 19. And they're like, well, we would live there. And I'm like, you can't afford it. No, my intention is to find it ideally like one person. I mean, it's a very small space and someone that I feel comfortable with living in my backyard as a single woman to increase my sense of security. I've had a break into my home and through my bedroom window, which is pretty gross. And I wasn't harmed physically, but anyway, so my intention is to have somebody that I really trust living in my backyard. Thank you.
No, I'm sorry to hear that. My second question is for I guess your designer. Were there alternative designs considered for this that wouldn't impact the roof, or is it just the way kind of things have laid out? Is that like this is the only option? Can you kind of expand on that for a bit, please? Thanks.
Our aim was to reduce the impact. So basically, we've taken the existing footprint and extruded it up, straight up, no greater increase in the existing footprint. All we need is the head height in order to maintain the requirements for the Ontario Building Code for an occupied space. So it's really, I know it looks dynamic, but the reality is all it is a building and there's a stair and a roof. That's it. So.
And if Mr. Chair, if I can indulge with one last question, if hypothetically this were to not be approved, the height not to be approved, would you be exploring other options of converting the garage into this coach, or is this kind of really set dead on the building height issue?
My understanding is that the impetus of this was to have a garage, and then the bonus was to be able to afford housing in order to sort of help fund this garage that was already existing on site. So that would be the plan. I am unsure if we would ever convert it back into a simple living garden suite. I think the impetus here was to reinstate the garage.
Perhaps if we could just confirm, is there currently a garage there?
No, there's just a footprint.
There's a like a sort of a
slab,
a dotted line on the ground where a garage once used to be, or is there actually a concrete slab? Or
I have not dug down. I think there's gravel on there right now, but there is definitely a distinguished spot where the existing survey shows that there is a garage there.
Thank you. So I just want to confirm with Ms. Al-Khatib from the city that the city has no concerns with this application. Is that correct?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, there is no concerns.
Thank you. Now we have referred to concerns from some neighbors. I wonder, are any of the neighbors online and wish to make any comments, or anybody else from the public for that matter? Okay, I don't see anybody here in the room. Somebody is coming online. Okay.
Yes, hello, can you hear me?
I can hear you. Are you on screen as well, or are you just on a sound line?
I'm just, hold on,
Yeah. There we go. Thank you. If you could identify yourself, please.
So my name is Jordy McConnell, and I own, my wife and I own 181 Hinton. And so there's a number of points that we would like to share. Bridget has been a neighbor for a number of years, and we wish her only well, and we hope that she is a neighbor for many years to come. We were quite disappointed that we weren't consulted in advance of the planning. We did speak to her about that, and she did apologize. The three adjoining landowners to the north were not consulted. And this is unfortunate because these would be the properties that would be affected by shadow. In the application on the title page, it said a line that said that the adjoining properties would not be affected by shadow. And I found that interesting because I then inquired as to whether a shadow study had been done at that stage and was told, no, there had not been done one. And so one was only done after we submitted our comment. I discovered a website that you could do a shadow study. I would like to bring the attention of the committee and Mr. Chair to the fact that the submission by the planner is the first week of September. Those were the shadows. The sun is relatively high. The reality of the circumstance is that from, I'm also speaking on behalf, the comment was on behalf of Rita Mendoza that owns 30, I forget her number, 38 Tyndall, and she's affected as well. So the reality is that from October to March, in the morning, the kitchens of 181, 183 will be affected by shadow throughout the morning from 8 to 10 a.m. And that is from October to as late as the end of March. Miss Mendoza's home, which is a home care, at the back of the house, she has playrooms. This is on the south side. She has playrooms for the children. And those playrooms would be shadowed from 1 till 3. So you can imagine daycare hours from 1 till 3 from October through March as well. So
Jordy, if you don't mind, I have to interject for one moment.
No, please wait.
Those children don't go outside.
You'll be given an opportunity to reply at the end.
My reference is to the windows at the back of the house where the playrooms are located inside of the house. That's the principal comment regarding shadows. There was, from our research, there hasn't been a garage there. Obviously any planner is going to spin, I understand that. And I'm glad that you got clarification with regards to the fact that there isn't an existing garage. The best that I can see is there hasn't been a garage since the 1990s there. We don't have a problem with a garage, but it shows you the communication that's going on. I also would bring attention, the committee and Mr. Chair's attention. This does not affect us directly, but there is the garage door in the plans that were submitted is facing the south. It's on the south elevation, whereas the driveway is on the west. So I don't quite understand what that circumstance is. But our major concern is that shadows will affect the three neighbors on the north side.
Okay, thank you very much. Maybe if I could just confirm with Ms. Al-Khatib, it is my understanding, and I stand to be corrected, but as I say, it is my understanding that there is no requirement to do a shadow study when making an application such as this. Is that correct?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, there is no requirement.
Okay. So just so it's clear that, it wasn't a deliberate omission on somebody's part. The shadow studies would be the exception rather than the rule in this sort of application. Okay, thank you very much, Mr. McConnell. Are there any other members of the public who wish to comment on this? Or any other comments that they may have? Okay, I'm going to ask my colleagues on the panel if any of them have any additional comments. Ms. Lequier?
Yeah, my question, Mr. Chair, is for Planning Committee. I noticed that the survey was dated 1991. If I can try to get these readers to unblur these words here. And on there, I do see a garage. And the Google map can show you different years. And I have seen a garage on site, since May 2012, there was some kind of structure there. And so I'm just trying to seek a bit of clarity of what that is, and maybe with the planning department, if it's not a garage or maybe it's an accessory structure, but could you speak to that a little bit and just provide some clarity?
Are you able to answer that, Ms. Alcatib?
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't know the history of what was existing there before.
Okay. I won't ignore that question, Ms. Lequier, but maybe if there are any other questions from any of the other panel members, and then we'll give the applicant an opportunity to respond to that question as well as the other comments that have been made. Okay, seeing none, so it is open to the applicant, whether themselves or through a representative, to reply to any of the comments that have been made, and perhaps if you are able to specifically answer the question that Ms. Lequier made asked.
Specifically to the garage.
Well, whether what has or has not been on that space over the last 20 odd years, I suppose, with the periods of time that you had identified, Ms. Lequier.
I am unaware of the history of the property. All I know is on the survey that we have legally, it says there is a garage on site. There is evidence of a footprint of a garage. How high it was in the previous lifespan, we don't know. That's all I can speak to that, but there is a history of that. In regards to the comments by the neighbors, we want to say that there has been outreach to the neighborhood in order to go over this design. I think that I feel for the neighbors in regards to if they don't feel like they were included in that conversation. I do appreciate that there is concern about shadows. I would be reminiscent if I didn't say, like, I think that there are larger trees and other structures there that cause a larger shadow than this actual building, but I understand their concern. And so if we were happy to run future other digital models to show that this would not negatively impact any greater than what's already there on that side. But this is a neighborhood, and we appreciate that people are very concerned and they don't want the existing fabric to be ruined. We are trying to do something good and trying to ameliorate things. So we would certainly request some support on that, but happy to answer any other questions there might be.
Okay. Ms. Tremblay, I noticed you've got your hand up again. Sorry if I didn't catch you earlier.
No, sorry, it's just a comment. So, the applicant is saying that, there's trees and other things, but trees, I mean, the good thing about trees, they may be blocking light, but you can always prune them, right? There's things that you can do to help alleviate some of the issues. So I just, it's not quite the same as a solid structure in terms of its impact. Just wanted to make that comment. Thank you.
Some trees lose their leaves in winter and don't block sun in wintertime, whereas structures are structures. Yeah. Okay. Well, again, unless there's any more questions, comments from my panel members, colleagues, I think it's obvious we'll take this one to reserve as well, and a decision will be forthcoming within 10 days. Thank you very much for the presentation this afternoon. For your time. Okay, moving along to item number 9. Did we deal with? No, we dealt with that one earlier, didn't we? I believe. Yes, sorry. Item number 10. This is 9 Ladouceur Street. Okay. I don't think we need a presentation on this. I think, though, effectively what we would like to confirm, or at least what I would like to confirm in my own mind, is that somebody went ahead and did something that they probably shouldn't have done. And now you're coming forward to try and, if not rectify that, at least regularize it. Would that be a fair characterization?
So just to identify myself, Evan Saunders from Foten Planning and Design, representing the applicant, Marco Reyes, who's joined via Zoom. So to answer your question, just for some history on the site, I think it's important. The property was originally redeveloped in 2015 through a minor variance application seeking relief related to aisle width, as well as setbacks, as well as some other provisions. And at the time, the city had advised the owner that the site was going to be rezoned as part of the city initiated zoning bylaw amendment affecting the property. And as a result, he chose to develop the property with a 3-unit dwelling or triplex, and then hoping in the future, following the city initiated zoning bylaw amendment, to add another bedroom, making it a low-rise apartment, which would be permitted in what is now the current R4 UB zone. But upon doing so, at the building permit phase, the building code services representative flagged 2 variances, the 2 that are to be addressed through this application. And those were flagged, they were unanticipated at the time of building. So to answer your question, yes, that'd be a fair characterization. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, do any of the panel members have any questions, comments? No. Ms. Al-Khatib, if I could confirm with you that the city has no objections or no concerns with these proposals at this time?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. No, there is no concerns and no objections.
Okay. Are there anybody wishes to speak to this? Ms. Hode, are you on? Are you still with us? Do we know? Yes. Did you wish to speak to this?
Are you speaking to me? I was being promoted and I couldn't see or hear you.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm glad to hear you've been promoted.
Yes,
I was wondering because we have your name on record as having submitted some comments. I was wondering whether or not you wish to.
I certainly do.
Okay. As much.
The Hindenburg Community Association is very concerned about this application. Getting information about what has happened in the rear yard has been very difficult. We know what has happened within the structure itself. We don't oppose the intensification, the addition of a unit, although it would have been preferable to do it with benefit of building permit, which I suspect it was not. But the rear yard, if you can look at the submission I sent you, the rear yard appears to be, first of all, the rear yard of the, when the decision was given in 2015 was to be grass. It's clearly indicated, although the print is very small, the rear yard was grass from the extent of the balconies to the rear lot line, except where the stairs come down. The front yard was also supposed to be grass. What appears to be on the site at the moment is a shed. If you can see from the aerial photo, which is in the submission I made, it covers the entire rear yard, except for the stairs. And I think, just let me check the photo again. Oh yes, the driveway goes all the way to the back of the rear of the property. And in fact, I submitted a photograph where you can see a car parked on that section of the driveway. So my question is, I would say, having just checked the accessory structure part of the bylaw, I'm not sure if it exceeds the height because you can't tell that from the photos. I'm not sure it meets the yard requirements, and the size of an accessory structure, which I suspect this is, I don't know what else it could be, is not to exceed lot coverage of the yard in which it is located. I think I may have missed some words there, but I do have a question that as to the legality of this structure and why the applicant is not required to meet the R4 UB bylaw requirement to provide soft landscaping in the rear yard. as we discussed with Mr. Yalkowski, a sponge is preferable to a large quantity of asphalt. And it is my understanding that the rear yard under the shed is asphalt as well as that long driveway. So that's my question. I'm hoping you can get the answer to it. And I would also suggest that we would like to have a condition, as I mentioned with the other application on Lowry, that any part of the paved driveway that is not required to access the legal, I guess, parking spaces would be, there would be a barrier to prevent parking on that part of the pavement, although I believe there's a little green thing shown on it. I'm not quite sure what that is. I only received the plans from yesterday, and as I say, the planner does say that he wasn't sure about the size of the shed, but I think the aerial photos show the size of the shed. It is not the size shown on the drawing or site plan submitted. So those are my questions and concerns. I hope that we can solve the problem of why does this applicant not have to provide soft landscaping in the rear yard? He did tell me, as I noted, that he couldn't because of bedrock. However, I think you'll see from the photos I submitted that other residents on the street have been able to provide landscaping in the rear yards. And I do think it's important. We need tree cover, and we certainly need much more permeable surface, as the past couple of weeks has shown us if we doubted it before. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Hode. Perhaps, Ms. Alkatib, you might be in a position to address the issue of soft landscaping requirements.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So usually for the R4 zone, it's required for the lots smaller than 360 meter. As I remember, it's required for a 35 meter square of softscaping in the rear yard. But like in this case, there is no change of use. So already the regulations for the R4 zone doesn't change from having 3-unit triplex to low rise. So therefore, it's what's happening in the rear yard is as of right. It's not changing by the change of use. So that's why it's not a concern from our side.
So just so I understand, are you saying that the lot does currently comply with the soft landscaping requirements?
It does not.
It does not, but that's an illegal, a non-conforming, but a legal non-conforming use. Is that what you're just suggesting? Okay, thank you. Perhaps if you'd like to address Ms. Hode's comments and the issue, soft landscaping and others.
Yes, absolutely. I think it may be helpful to bring up my presentation. I think it's slide 10, I'll guess, which shows the plans that, as Ms. Hode referenced, I also shared with planning staff to go over, should be in the presentation that I provided. Yeah, it's hard to see with the color on the screen that I'm seeing, but these were the plans that we shared with planning staff as well as Ms. Hode. These indicate the parking on the site that we hope to legally establish through this application, showing the 2 spaces as well as the aisle width, their width, and their length, showing they're zoning compliant. In addition to this, we have listened to Ms. Hode and the Community Association as well as planning staff's recommendation to incorporate greater soft landscaping onto the property. In doing so, we spoke with the owner and he's willing to build planter boxes in both the front and rear yards. For the front yard, you can, if you skip to the next slide, please. The planter box in the front yard wraps around the front porch and is to be built by the owner. This is to increase the front yard conditions, adding soft landscaping where currently there's river rock. There's currently a small planter there, but this expands the soft landscaping in the front yard. And then to the next slide, please. For the rear yard, we're proposing a planter box be built on the area that's currently paved, just beyond the zone, the proposed parking space. And the purpose for this is to improve upon and add to the soft landscaping in the rear yard. There's currently a thin strip at the rear where the retaining wall and the rear fence meet. But this is to provide soft landscaping as well, to add to the overall site, as well as to prevent parking from extending further back onto the paved area of the property, while also allowing for snow storage in the winter and access to the shed for the bikes and access to maneuver the bikes out of the yard, as well as the area around the planter is going to remain in order to provide residents with access to the planter, whether they be planting stuff in it and access it, water it, maintain it as needed. And one of the reasons we're doing planters, as Ms. Hode alluded to, was that the bedrock on the property has not allowed for grass to take in the area. In the past, it was grassed, but it was never able to survive. So this planter helps to ensure that the vegetation on the soft landscaping will, in greater hope, survive, especially due to the snow storage potential in front of it. The salt would damage any sort of soft landscaping or vegetation in the rear yard. So this helps raise it off of the ground and give it the best chance of survival as possible. And I think it's also worth noting on the adjacent properties where there is soft landscaping in the rear yard, you can see from some of the aerial imagery, a lot of it is in planters such as this. Because the bedrock is so high, it's hard to sustain any sort of, I don't want to call it mature vegetation, but more than perennial grass.
Can you just clarify so you were just talking about that highlighted in green, which does come up reasonably well on my screen anyway. That's the planter.
Yes.
The hashed area to the top with just a single diagonal lines, that's an existing shed, is it, of some description? That's the bicycle storage?
Yes, that's the approximate location and size of the existing bicycle storage shed.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Tremblay?
Yeah, I guess that's a question for, is it Ms. Alcatab on this application?
Yes, it is Ms. Alcatab.
Okay, so in your report, you mentioned that this site had been subject of minor variances in 2015. What you don't talk about is whether or not there was any conditions imposed at the time. I know it's not a severance, but was there any conditions, or was it tied to plans that would have shown more landscaping than what we have today? I'm just trying to get a sense of what's supposed to be there based on those approvals and what we're talking about today.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So the minor variance application done in 2015 didn't include anything related to softscaping. So there was 6 minor variances, all of them not related to softscaping. And in 2017, there is a new bylaw that was released. So maybe things have changed a lot since that time. And I didn't see any conditions, according to my understanding, in this application coming from the Committee of Adjustment. I found that it was all granted.
So what happens sometimes is, even though some components of the site plan aren't the subject of a minor variance, the site plan might actually have notations on it that would say landscaped area or grassed area or something like that. So that even though it doesn't form part of the minor variances, when the committee gives its approval for those minor variances and ties it to plans, it's still tied to what's written on those plans. So did you have a look at that to see whether or not there was a promise, regardless, on the plans of having landscaped areas?
So the agent already have added the plans that were approved in 2015 to their presentation, and it mentions kinds of arrows saying grass, but it's not clearly identified where exactly is that grass. So I went through that and I did this research to find exactly where was the grass proposed, but there was no clear area saying this area will be grassed or where exactly was it. It's just arrows saying grass. Me myself, I couldn't identify exactly where is that area, but as I have mentioned, the bylaws have changed. I don't know what happened between this time to now. I don't know.
Thank you. That answers my question.
Okay. Any other question, Mr. Bladwick?
So, Mr. Saunders, for my benefit, this building was converted to 3 units and then illegally converted into 4.
It was originally redeveloped as a 3-unit dwelling in 2015 via the 2015 minor variance application that we spoke about.
Yep.
And permits were beginning to be obtained for it to become a 4-unit dwelling. To my knowledge, it has not been occupied as a 4th unit. We would need to confirm with Marco Reyes, the owner, on that front. But to my knowledge, the permits are being sought to legalize it as a 4th unit.
Were building permits ever issued for the addition of this 4th unit? Occupied or otherwise?
I would need to defer to the owner on that, because that is before we were retained for this project.
So there's a very good chance that we're dealing with a 3-unit building with an illegal 4th unit. And I'm just wondering, I'm looking at the 2 variances. How do these variances regularize your 4-unit building?
1 moment. I have just lost everybody on the screen. Yes, I appreciate your, my screen for some reason has decided to. There we go. I believe maybe, is it Marco, you're the owner, you can perhaps, sorry, what's your last name, Mr. Reyes, if you could respond to that.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, good. I'm sorry, what's the question?
The question is, was that 4th unit added with building permit approval or not?
No, well, I'll explain the situation here. So when I wanted
I asked you a simple question, Mr. Reyes, answer the question.
Yes, I submitted a building permit. Yes, I did.
Was it granted?
No, no, because this is the first step in the process. So this is what I'm trying to explain. Let's say, I'm sorry, but everyone, I'm hearing all this sort of speculation from you guys, but I would like to actually explain the situation, because you're making it sound like I did everything illegally and I'm trying to get away with something, and that wasn't the case. What I wanted to do when I first wanted to redevelop that property, I found that that there was not enough affordable housing, and here we are, and everyone's begging for more housing. I wanted to create smaller, more affordable units, because everything that was being built in the neighborhood was luxury 2-bedroom apartments that at the time were going for over $2,000, and now it's going over $3,000. So I was trying to do that. The city agreed with me. Everyone wanted the initiative of affordable housing, but they said the process from going from 3 to 4 units made it impossible. And I was assured by everyone at the city planning office saying the process is going to get a lot simpler. Why don't you just build the 3 units and then later add the 4th unit, which is what I've been trying to do for years now. And so when you to sort of say to suggest that I've done stuff illegally and I haven't followed the rules, I want to say that every step of the way I was assured by the planning and had support of not only the city planning, but by the councillor, by everyone I spoke with, and they all said, yeah, we know the process is flawed. Just wait, and it's going to get easier. Apparently, it hasn't been, because now I'm just faced with more challenges, and all I'm trying to do is just add this 300 square foot bachelor for people who can't afford to spend $2,000 a month or $3,000 a month to live in the neighborhood. Like the city is granting 30-story apartment buildings on areas where the zoning is 6 stories. I'm trying to add a 4th unit to a location that is right by the transit way, and I'm just trying to keep legal parking spaces that back then I was forced to put in, which I had no problem doing. I put the parking spaces in the back, which is I was told to put the parking spaces in the back, have a porch in the front. None of the other development that has gone up did any of that. I need space to plow the snow to the back. I'm sorry, I just
question.
Yeah, but okay. First of all,
the question was, did I apply? Yes, I did apply.
Okay, we don't deal with 30-story buildings at the Committee of Adjustment. That's somebody else's wheelhouse. Can I confirm in my mind, and I think maybe this might address Mr. Blatherwick's question, is that unit currently rented out and occupied, or is it unoccupied?
No, it's not occupied.
Sorry?
No.
It is
not.
unoccupied.
No.
Okay. Does that?
I was hoping to occupy, have it occupied soon. And then
Mr. Chair, if I-
Yeah, if you could identify yourself for the
Thank
record.
you again, Jacob Bolduc with Foten Planning and Design. I think to respond a little more directly to Mr. Blatherwick's question through you, Mr. Chair. There was some discussion around the timing of the original variance in 2015 about how this development should go. Obviously, the developer was looking to construct a number of units. You'd want to maximize the development potential of a site if you're redeveloping it. At the time, a triplex was permitted, but it was made obvious to the owner that the R4 zoning provisions, the new UA through UD zoning provisions would be coming through the door. And so rather than apply for a zoning bylaw amendment to permit a low-rise apartment in this area, why don't you just wait until these come in, build a triplex, prepare your triplex for potentially a fourth unit. My understanding is this would be in the basement, but don't obtain an occupancy permit for that unit. It could be common space, vacant, however you want to manage it, but the building functions and acts as a triplex in accordance with the original building permit. What we're doing today is as a result of that change to the R4 zone, there are certain things that were required when it was a triplex that are no longer permitted as a result of this change to a low-rise apartment building. Sort of a, I don't want to call it a gap between the original zoning bylaw and the changes to the R4 provisions, but hopefully something that gets addressed through the new zoning bylaw. So what effectively has happened is that in order to build a triplex, he was required to provide parking. They obtained a variance for related to the side yard setback and a number of other things. In seeking to permit that fourth unit and obtain that occupancy permit, it would be flagged through zoning compliance that in order to get to a low-rise apartment building, the new R4 provisions, which came in after the triplex was obtained, now prohibit parking for a lot of less than 450 square meters. And that now that you've gone to a low-rise apartment building, you have to reestablish that side yard setback because it was permitted for a triplex. So as a result of adding a unit internal to the building and seeking an occupancy permit, these variances have been triggered. There's no changes to the exterior of the building. And as per Mr. Reyes, the unit is not occupied.
Okay, thank you. Is that? Yeah. Okay. Do any of the members have any additional questions? Thank you very much. I mean, that was a very helpful explanation. It clarified things for me. Okay. Does any other member of the public have any questions or issues they want to raise at this time?
Mr. Chair, the city planner.
Oh,
Ms.
sorry.
O'Connell has her hand raised.
I'm sorry, I didn't see that. Please go ahead, Ms. O'Connell.
Not a problem. Mr. Chair, just to add to some clarity to the application and Madame Tremblay's earlier question, Ms. Al-Khatib and I have just pulled the decision from the earlier 2015 to see what was the decision made. And the committee at that time tied the variances tied the decision to the plans insofar as the variances sought, which means it tied it to the plans just related to those particular variances, not to the plans. It's in its entirety were tied to those variances at that time. I'm hoping that provides some clarity in terms of what was approved back at the time in 2015.
Thank you, Ms. O'Connell. That is helpful.
Yeah, thank you very much, Ms. O'Connell. Okay, in that case, again, seeing nobody else is there anybody else who's got their hands up that I might not see on my screen? We're good. Okay. Do you wish to provide any sort of closing comments at this point? I mean, I think it's pretty clear we're going to be reserving, but.
No, I don't think we have any other closing comments. Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much. Well, we will be reserving on this one as well, and you'll get the decision within 10 days. That's normal.
Thanks for your time.
Thank you. Okay, we're now moving to item 11. And there's my piece of paper for this one. This is 435 Echo Drive, which was adjourned from our meeting 2 weeks ago, I believe. And so I think even though last time the discussion was broadly on whether or not to adjourn, my sense was that most of the issues got raised and that we really was sort of hoping that you would be able to address the issue of whether or not the basement does actually need to be raised, which requires the height variance, and an issue I raised around whether or not if you obtained a negative, a positive, well, if the Ontario Land Tribunal decision goes one way or the other, whether that would have any impact on this. But if there are any other issues you wish to address, by all means do. But I think I believe those were the issues that we were concerned about.
Yeah, sure, Mr. Chair. So I can just speak to those issues now. I do have a presentation if
maybe it would be worth it because we didn't have a presentation last time.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, and members of the committee. So my name is Sim Mansour and I'm a planner at Novatech. And I'll be presenting the minor variance for this property. So next slide, please. So this subject property is located in the Old Ottawa East neighborhood within the City of Ottawa's Capital Ward. Next slide, please. Now, the subject property is an interior lot and it's located on the eastern side of Echo Drive. So you can see the property on the image in front of you. The subject property has a lot frontage of 9.14 meters along Echo Drive in a lot area of approximately 276 square meters. Next slide, please. So the proposal seeks to redevelop the subject property with a 3-story detached dwelling. So the slide in front of you shows the proposed site plan on the left and the proposed elevations on the right. So to your point, Mr. Chair, about my previous minor variance application. So that application was filed on February 9th of this year, and it was heard at the March 15th hearing. So with the exception of the reduced rear yard setback minor variance, all the other variances were approved. So this decision is currently being appealed to the Ontario Land Tribunal. A hearing date hasn't been set for that application. And the requested variance before you today is unrelated to those previously requested variances. They're not tied in any way. And they would be required for this property regardless of the outcome of the appeal. So next slide, please. So this slide shows the requested variance. So the variance is required for an increased building height of 11 meters in order to accommodate geotechnical and site servicing issues on the subject property. So just to quickly go into the 4 tests here. So the first test is that the general intent and purpose of the official plan is maintained. So the subject property is within the inner urban transect and it's part of the Rideau Canal Special District in the OP. And the proposed development meets the intent of the OP by providing a context-sensitive dwelling unit that respects the character of the Rideau Canal Special District. So despite the increase in height, the proposal is generally consistent with the heights of other properties in the neighborhood, which are mostly between 2 and 4 stories. So the variance maintains the general intent and purpose of the OP. Next slide, please. So the second test for minor variances is the general intent and purpose of the zoning bylaws maintained. So the subject property is zoned residential 4th density subzone UD under the City of Ottawa zoning bylaw. So the proposed development meets the general intent of the maximum height provisions to ensure that building massing and scale is appropriate for the neighborhood and that there's no adverse impacts. So the 3-story height is consistent with the built form that's been envisioned for this zone, which is typically 3 stories. And the figure you can see on the screen shows that the permitted heights within the R4 UD zone, which are outlined in red. So a height of 11 meters is permitted in this zone for a number of other built forms, such as townhouses, 3-unit dwellings, and stacked dwellings. So even though the proposed height exceeds the permitted height for a detached dwelling by a meter, it's not out of line with the maximum height that's envisioned in this zone. And as I've mentioned a few times, the proposed increase in building height is also required due to geotechnical conditions on the site, as well as the elevation of existing surfacing conditions. So without these site conditions, the proposed building wouldn't need to be raised by a meter, and we would meet the maximum permitted height in the zone. So it's our opinion that the general intent and purpose of the zoning bylaw is maintained. Next slide, please. The third test is that the minor variance is considered desirable for the use of land. So the proposed development is considered desirable for the use of land as it'll provide a multi-generational family-sized dwelling unit that fits in well with the character and built form of the neighborhood. So despite the minor increase in building height, the proposed building height and massing will fit in well with the neighborhood where there's a number of dwellings between 2 and 4 stories, including a 3.5, 4-story apartment building located directly to the south. You can actually see it on the rendering to the right of the proposal. So the proposed increase in height is also technical in nature, and it's required to accommodate site conditions or the groundwater conditions and the servicing, the elevation of servicing to the site. So the minor variances are considered desirable. Finally, the fourth test is that the variance is considered minor in nature. So the proposed variance constitutes an increase of 1 meter. So this difference is relatively small, as you can see on the slide in front of you. Oh, sorry, new slide. Yeah, as you can see on this slide in front of you. So the rendering that's on the left is the proposed development that has the height of 11 meters. And the rendering on the right is the 10-meter height that's permitted as of right. So you can, as you can see in the image, the difference between the two heights is relatively small and relatively hard to notice, but it'll allow the proposed development to accommodate those site servicing and groundwater conditions. Excuse me. Next slide, please. So the slide in front of you shows an excerpt from the geotechnical report that was prepared from the subject property. So this was also sent to the committee as well, a redacted version of this report. So this excerpt speaks to the groundwater levels that were observed on the property, and it states that wet soils were observed only a meter below existing average grade. So in order to reduce the likelihood of flooding, the proposed development has been raised by 1 meter. Next slide, please. So the increased building height is also required due to the elevation of services on Echo Drive. So slide in front of you shows the site servicing plan that was prepared for the property. So the services from the street are located at an elevation of 62.97 meters, which you can see on the plan. And according to the owner's engineer, an underside footing of at least 63.5 meters is required in order to provide a gravity outlet for sanitary services. Next slide, please. So despite the requested increase in building height, the proposed development includes appropriate floor to ceiling heights, as you can see on the cross section that's on screen. So each story of the proposed development has a floor to ceiling height of between 2.6 and 2.9 meters, which is about 8.5 to 9.5 feet, depending on each story. And these floor to ceiling heights are appropriate for a newly built detached dwelling, and they will accommodate the needs of the family. So the variances are considered minor in nature. Next slide, please. So in conclusion, the proposed variances maintain the general intent and purpose of the OP and zoning, and the requested variances are desirable for the use of land and are minor in nature. So it's our opinion that the proposed variances meet all 4 tests of the Planning Act and represent good land use planning. Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much. So the city, the planner was Ms. Linker, but I believe it's Mr. Van Wyck is replacing her this afternoon. So our understanding now is that you don't have concerns with the application, but you basically don't believe the application. Would that be? We've been advised that you have reviewed the geotechnical report provided by Novatech and believe that it would be possible to construct the basement level as originally planned if additional mitigation measures were taken to reduce impacts to the groundwater. So could you perhaps clarify what appears to me anyway to be a bit of a contradiction there?
Yes, Mr. Chair, thank you. So planning staff did evaluate this application strictly on its planning merits outside of the geotech report. I did hear from our engineers while Ms. Linker was away that they do accept the geotech report and it sounds logical to them. So all good on that front. And with respect to the report that my colleague wrote, we have no concerns from a planning perspective for the increase in height that's requested.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Do panel members have any questions at this point? I don't know, I do appreciate that. Okay, so Mr. Dance, you were with us, I believe, 2 weeks ago and had some concerns at that point. I suspect that maybe not all of them have been addressed because you did want to see the entire report and haven't, and we've only received a redacted portion of it. But what would you like to tell us today?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you. First off, John Dance, 68 McNaughton, Ottawa. I am the chair of the Old Ottawa East Community Association Planning Committee. I thank you for this opportunity. We just do not see a compelling case for the extra meter in height. It's a low density dwelling type. Had it been a higher density, yes, it would have been permitted, but this is not a multi-unit dwelling. The applicant has a variety of means to reduce the height, but rather than design for these means, the additional meter is being sought. And I think if you look at the staff report, I mean, despite the fact city staff they're not opposing it, they say that staff have reviewed the geotechnical report and believe, based on the information provided, that it would be possible to construct the basement level as originally planned if additional mitigation measures were taken to reduce impacts to the groundwater. And, frankly, you look at all the other places in Echo, and they obviously have done this sort of thing to reduce the impacts of groundwater. And indeed, in our letter to you, we suggested a couple of means by which the applicant could live within the 10 meters. As you know, the Committee of Adjustment has already approved 2 minor variances for this, and we didn't oppose the 2 that were approved. But this one, it simply seems excessive, and it seems not minor. Perhaps if this was the only one, it would be okay, but they already sort of had a double front balcony. They have almost a doubling of the rooftop amenity. And it's interesting, when you look at the images that were presented by Photon, you see that this new proposed structure has sort of the same mass as the apartment building immediately to the south. And it just seems to us that this is not a minor proposition when an applicant can come up with something that really is a single family dwelling that has a greater mass, or sort of seems more massive than an apartment building, a 3.5 story apartment building immediately to the south. I guess those are my comments. It's just, they've already received 2 approved minor variances. They're asking for this 3rd, so they don't have to spend money on some mitigation factors, so they don't have to have this extra meter. They have floor to ceiling levels that are a heck of a lot higher than any house I've been in, including the basement. They do have the means of living within the 10 meters, and we would recommend that the committee not approve this requested minor variance, because quite frankly, it's not minor, and it really doesn't contribute to the official plan's desire of having more people, more units. It's one dwelling unit. Mr. Chair, thank you very much, fellow colleague, fellow panel members. Thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you, Mr. Downs. Are there any other, there's nobody in the room here, are there any other people online who wish to make any comments at this point? I don't see any. Ms. Lequier, just in 1 second. Yeah, okay. All right, and Ms. Lequier.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I've got 2 questions. I'll start kind of with the first. The application mentioned multi-generational housing. Are there planned occupants, or is this for kind of future consideration? And kind of related to that, I can't recall from the plans whether these were self-contained units, meaning that they would be kind of more private than kind of an open. There's different ways to do multi-generational housing. So can you expand on that a little bit, please?
So thank you for the question. So this is a single like a detached dwelling, so it'll be a single family. The owners are planning on living in the unit with their parents and both sets of parents. It's part of the reason, and there was an elevator proposed as well that's taking up a lot of area in the house. So to answer your question, it's the owner's family is going to be living here. So those are the planned occupants, I guess.
Okay, but shared, like kitchen and all that, that will be shared within the family. So it's not a self-contained unit. Like there might be kitchenettes or anything, but there's not like actual
I don't think so. I would have to check the floor plans. I can do that quickly, but I don't believe it's
okay.
Like self-contained. It's
yeah
for the whole family to enjoy as a family.
Yeah, and then my second question is, I guess building on Mr. Dance's comments about the ceiling height. So should hypothetically the Committee of Adjustment not approve the height, what would be next steps? Would you just reduce the ceiling height? Instead of having whatever it was 9 meters, it'd be 8 meters, or sorry, feet, feet. For the individual floors is what I'm asking.
Yeah, so thanks again for the question. I mean, it would be difficult, I think, to reduce the floor to ceiling heights. I know that the applicant, the owners have looked into reducing that. I think it's our opinion that the heights are pretty reasonable. I know that, for example, the basement, they have a duct in the basement on the roof that's actually reducing the height. So it's actually really going to be about 7.5 feet, which is not really a lot of space. Again, like, yeah, I would point out that the increased floor to ceiling heights are not actually providing any extra space. I know Mr. Dance mentioned in his comments that it's excessive given the other variances. Well, I think that the variances should be evaluated each on their own merits. But also no additional space is being added here. So in terms of what the next steps would be for the owners, it would be very difficult. I mean,
So sorry, just for my own understanding, then there's no actual, like we're not converting the first story to become 9-foot ceilings when they were originally 8. Like this is the what you provided in your little chart in one of your slides. Those were what is existing there.
Exactly. Yeah. So that was what was existing in the previous application, essentially, and the only difference really has been that the building has moved up because the underside of footing has moved up by a meter. So the result of that is that the building height has moved up by a meter. So there's no difference in the floor to ceiling heights. They were reasonable, I think, from the get-go, and I believe they're still reasonable now. And the only difference is that underside of footing moving up by a meter.
Just to clarify, though, this is a completely new build we're talking about. It's not sort of adding a story on top of an existing building.
Yeah, so just, yes, to clarify, it is a new build. When I'm referring to the old plans, it's just the plan that was filed back in February. Yeah.
Okay, but to clarify, so then when compared to the current unit, then if let's say they have 8-foot ceilings and the new development is 9, you are actually asking for, like, it could be contained is what I'm just trying to hypothetically understand. I know it's not desirable by the applicant, but from an actual geological architectural perspective, it is possible to meet it within the whatever building code is applicable here.
I wouldn't be able to speak to the building code. I don't know the building code. This is just what the architect has told us, is that they're really, pushing the floor to ceiling heights in terms of what's reasonable in a newly built single detached. I know it's been different before in older homes, but this is pretty typical and actually a little bit small for single detached dwellings. And we want to be able to provide enough space, living space, and make the space actually enjoyable for the owners. Right? We don't want to just contain them only for a meter of space. And I think that's a meter difference is quite small. So.
Okay, thank you for clarifying.
I have a question that perhaps, Ms. Roy, you could address, but it also is perhaps partly addressed to the city. And I did raise it in an application a couple of weeks ago. When does a series of minor variances get to the point where the collective variance is such that what we're left with looks nothing like what is contemplated by the appropriate bylaw? You've already had a couple of variances from the committee. You're challenging and that's entirely fine. I mean, at what point? And I'm not suggesting that you are coming back, one at a time, but at what point does the cumulative effect of minor variances mean that the whole intent of the bylaw has basically been thrown out the kitchen window?
I don't know if Mr. Van Wyk will have any additional, comments on this, but I think that I believe that the variances individually are minor. Or this is a separate application than the other one, right? And this is unrelated. So I mentioned a bit in my presentation, and I'll mention it again, like this, the variance that we're seeking here doesn't really tie to anything that was sought in the previous application. Like whether or not that is approved or not, the owners will require this height variance if they're going to build something similar to this, similar size 3-story detached dwelling here. If that application is not approved, they'll have to modify their building, but they would still need this height variance because ultimately it comes down to the elevation of services. Their engineers told them that they need a particular underside of footing, and that's why they're requesting this variance. Doesn't really have anything to do with the other variances, and I do see your point about when does it become too much. when are you not no longer really even following the bylaw at that point? I don't think this is it, right? I think that these are variances that this variance is unrelated to a previous application. That application is to be decided by the Ontario Land Tribunal and is unrelated to the one that we have that's before you today.
Thank you. Mr. Van Wyck, you popped up on the screen, so.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. It's a good theoretical discussion. We've seen many different kinds of applications where one variance is requested or 7 are requested at a time. I think when we do pre-consult with applicants, we make a recommendation and leave it up to them at the end of the day which course of action they wish to pursue, whether it's a minor zoning amendment or a series of minor variance applications. I think it depends whether or not the Planning Act requirements can be met and whether or not the 4 tests can be met for each and every one of the asks. But it is certainly a consideration what that cumulative impact might be.
Okay, thank you very much. Colleagues, do we have any more questions at this point? Okay. In that case, Ms. Schroer, do you have any sort of closing? I think, again, you can probably assume that we're going to be taking this, reserving on this one and discussing it, but have you got any more any closing comments or anything else you'd like us to consider?
Yeah, I would just a few things. I guess I would just start off by saying, I think we've gone through the 4 tests. It's pretty clear that this is not something that's excessive. It's required due to the elevation of services. Staff have mentioned, the groundwater conditions, and Mr. Dance also mentioned that he believed that the owners were just trying to save money on mitigation measures. Well, that's not the case. It's also, I think, really comes down to the elevation of services, having a gravity outlet for services. Just makes a lot of sense. There's no increase in living space here. It's basically just for that elevation of services that this is required. And again, this is a height that is contemplated for this zone. I know it's Mr. Dance brought up as well that it's not a multi-unit dwelling, but that at the end of the day, the built form is the built form, right? Whether a triplex doesn't look much different, at least in my opinion, from a single detached, a 3-story single detached from the street. Both of these are contemplated in this area, and it's the owner's choice to develop this as a multi-generational single family dwelling for their family. This is something that's required due to the elevation of services, and we would really implore you to grant this variance. Thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Dance, I'm not sure whether you were putting your hand up. You were bouncing around my screen there a little bit, and I wasn't sure if it was the technology trying to get me again.
Well, I didn't know if I'd be allowed to speak, but yes, I do have just one comment. If I may respond to what was just said, and sorry, it's Novatech, not Photon. I point out that staff said it would be possible to construct the basement level as originally planned if additional mitigation measures were taken to reduce impacts to ground level. It's preference on the part of the client. It's not a requirement. They can spend money to do it, as I'm sure almost everybody else on Echo has done. So I don't go along with this. They have no choice but to raise the structure meter. And we set out how they could get around, how they could cope with the storms, or rather the sanitary sewer with its elevation. So I just would like to make that point, and I hope you consider that. And again, thank you very much for listening to me.
Yeah, I mean, I think, again, I haven't been on this committee for a very long period of time, but I think you could sometimes make that argument about many of the variance requests that are presented to the committee, that if you stuck within the bylaw, you wouldn't need a variance. But yeah, Ms. Rowe, one last comment.
Yeah, just respectfully to Mr. Dance, I would say that the geotechnical reasons and the groundwater wet soil is not the only reason for this. It is also the elevation of services. And as you correctly pointed out, I mean, we could make this argument about every application that's before you, that that you're making a choice. Yeah, the owners are making a choice. We believe that this is minor, this is good planning. And that's what we're required to consider. It's not whether there was a choice or not. Because you can say that about every application.
Okay. Thank you very much. We will take it, we will reserve, and you'll be able to get the decision within 10 days. Do we have any other business that's cropped up while we've been busy beavering away here? Thank you very much. And not seeing anyone in the room who wants to raise other business, and not seeing anyone online. This then, can I get a motion to adjourn from Mr. Blatherwick? All members in consent agreed. Thank you very much, everybody. I appreciate it.